Throws over the middle, and DeCoud for the interception, and he's going the other way. One man to beat, cuts back, beats the quarterback. He's on his way. Touchdown, Beavers!
Oregon State getting ready for their toughest tune-up to date, hosting Boise State tomorrow afternoon. How will the defense stop a lethal Broncos offense? We go one-on-one with D lineman Elu Aiden. And we get Mike Parker's take on the history between these two teams. What gives the Beavers the edge? Plus, big changes in Corvallis as athletic director Todd Stansbury leaves. Who will fill his shoes? All that and more ahead on #BeaversFootball. Less than 24 hours away from the Beavers' final non-conference tune-up as they welcome in Boise State tomorrow. Thanks for joining us. We are at Blitzlad in Southeast Portland, breaking down the matchup. I'm Amanda Maynard alongside Nigel Burton and a special guest tonight, Evanson Bernard, joining us. Evanson, we'll start with you. What were some of your takeaways of that Idaho State game?
A win's a win, and I think a lot of people are looking at it like, oh, it's Idaho State, but I think a win's a win. The last time they won was in September. So, that's a win's a win, and I think that the team has confidence now going into the Boise State game. It's kind of like a rivalry game almost. I remember when I was at Oregon State, when we played Boise State, it really felt like a rivalry game. So I'm excited to see what we do this weekend.
Nigel, did we see some progress when it comes to the Beavers this last week?
Well, I mean, I agree with Ev. A win is a win. You're not too worried about it. And obviously, everybody was going to compare the score of the Beavers game to the Colorado game, because obviously Colorado and Oregon State were the two teams that struggled the most in the Pac-12 the last year or two, and so there was going to be that natural comparison. But in reality, I think it's hard to learn anything from that team and in that game. The one thing I will say is it looks like we're still pretty immature in terms of how we approach games, because obviously the focus wasn't the same as it was going on the road to Minnesota. So yeah, but it's a young team, and they're going to do things like that.
All right, we're going to take a look at some of those special Oregon State, Boise State games over the years in our Widmer Brothers Brewing What is on Tap. And here's a look at the Beavers' schedule for the upcoming year. And again, looking at that Boise State game, let's talk a little bit more about that. How big of a test will this be for this team, given, again, they're coming off a game against Idaho State, like Nigel was talking about. You can't really maybe learn a lot from that. What kind of test do you think Boise State poses for them?
Well, they're obviously going to be a better team, and they're a little more sound. And so we got to, obviously we're going to have to step up our game. We can't make a lot of errors or else they'll tear us up.
Nigel, when you were kind of in that span of 2003, 2006, you guys were playing Boise State quite consistently, Oregon State was. What do you remember about some of those teams and I guess kind of the personality of the school and the program that it's been kind of consistent throughout the years?
Well, one, it was always better when we were at home versus when we went to Boise. I did not like the Smurf turf. It did not like me. So, and I think that's a huge advantage for Oregon State playing Boise in Corvallis. I think it could get ugly if this team went on the road and played Boise, because they definitely, their crowd gets into it. They seem to feed off of that energy. When you talk about Chris Peterson's Boise State teams, they were not only efficient, they didn't beat themselves. They went into games thinking that they would win. They would formation you to death. They flew around to the football. They didn't, you didn't find them outside of their gaps. They won on special teams. So, they were a well-rounded football team, and that's passed pretty well from Chris Peterson to Brian Harsin.
And that's what I was going to kind of ask you about that, because obviously Brian Harsin spent, a lot of time under Chris Peterson, then, going to Texas and some other spots. How similar are those two teams? What does the offense look like under Harsin?
I think they're a little bit more pass happy than they were when, and you could say maybe it's because they like the quarterback better, but they had some pretty good quarterbacks too under Chris Peterson. And I'll be honest with you, Rippon might actually be a better pro prospect than some of the quarterbacks that Chris Peterson had to work with. You go back to Jared Zabransky,
right?
Didn't really last too long in the NFL. Kellen Moore, who's going to be a perennial backup. At best, third string guy really in the NFL. So he might have a better skill set, and so which is why they lean on the pass a little bit more offensively. And defensively, they're pretty similar. Andy Avalos played at Boise State. He runs pretty, similar to the defense they ran when Bob Gregory was the defensive coordinator and Justin Wilcox. So that hasn't changed too much.
All right, so much more to come. What the Beavers defense needs to do to slow the Broncos down. But up next, Oregon State's AD is leaving. Who could be in line to succeed him? That's ahead. Well, big changes out of Oregon State. Just yesterday, the school announcing that athletic director Todd Stansbury is leaving to take the same job at Georgia Tech. It's going to be a little bit later in the fall. And Gary Anderson saying after practice on that, it's a transitional situation now that we're in, so it's a little bit different environment to be in. The key thing is whoever the AD is going to come and be here, it needs to be a destination. So a lot of people, taking Gary's words and saying, okay, you don't want it to be a stepping stone, it needs to be a destination. What did you kind of think about that when you heard him talking about that?
I think it's one of those situations where he's committed to be here for a while, and he doesn't want a guy just to come in and bounce. This will be his third AD.
Yeah.
And that's not a good look. Talking about Todd, you talk about a great guy. We're losing somebody that was very influential to Oregon State. Spent a lot of time here. When I was here, he was here. For him to come back, we were all excited for the guys that were around when he was here this first time. And so it's just kind of hard to see that, but we're heading the right direction. He installed some really great programs for our student athletes, and that was a great thing. He loved his student athletes. And so, we got to make sure that next guy is the same type of guy, and so we'll find it, but, it'll take time because we're in the middle of football season. If we want a Power 5 AD, we're not going to just leave their program right now, for Oregon State.
Yeah. Nigel, talk a little bit about what more they should be looking for in a hire.
Well, I mean, you're looking for the next Todd Stansbury, really. I mean, when you look at the situation, and here's what's really tough about it. Not only do you have 3 ADs for Gary Anderson in an 18-month period, but you're still finishing the funding for Victory Valley. Mm-hmm. There's plans for the west side of the stadium. That's kind of developing right now. There's also a Gill Coliseum renovation that's been. So this is quite possibly the worst timing for Todd to be leaving. And that being said and done, I don't want it to seem like he looked at Oregon State as a stepping stone, because I don't think that's the case. I think knowing Todd for all those years, it really came down to that was the one place, the one school that if that job ever came open, he'd be interested in. And if Florida was open, which it is, right. I don't think he had interest in that. Right. I don't think he would have interest in USC, which he didn't. This was the one place was Georgia Tech. So, to be fair to him, I think that needed to be said. But, I mean, he's an innovative guy. Just like Evanson said, his primary thing was the student athlete. And I think he brought a level of stability. I think the part that's going to be interesting is where you go moving forward. Just because even Todd talked about it took 12 months for him to really get his feet underneath him, get the organization set the way he wanted to start moving forward. So if you come in with somebody who has no clue how Oregon State works, it's going to take 12 to 15 months for that to happen. And will there be steps back going through that process?
And let's take a look at some of the names that folks are mentioning as possible candidates, both internal and external. Evanston, I'll start with you. Who kind of stands out on this list?
Oh, man. Obviously Pat Casey, right? People love Pat Casey. 2 national championships. Mark Masseri, been there for a while. He was actually with Todd and Bobby D at the same time at Oregon State. So a lot of people are bringing that name up. But, I mean, at the end of the day, I'm not picking who the next AD is, but we have a great pool of guys, but, we'll keep moving forward, and there's other guys out there besides that list.
When you look at Pat Casey, though, I mean, that's got to be a huge undertaking, to be the coach, to be the athletic director. Do you think that's going to happen, Nigel? You don't shaking your head now.
Not doing both.
Yeah.
The other thing that I'm not going to lie kind of irritates me is I don't see a whole lot of women on that list. Sure. And I think there are some great female ADs who've been out there.
The feminist over here, huh?
Yeah, hey, I got a daughter. I'm a super duper feminist. So I don't want anybody holding her back because of her gender. So I'm just saying and I think about the Debbie Yows. I think about all of the great ADs who've been out there. Barbara Hedges, who was the AD at Washington when I was there. So that's one thing that I just thought stuck out to me when I saw that list. But obviously I think, Mark Massari would be a great pick. I think, Pat Casey would probably have to step down as the baseball coach to do a good job. There's some people on that list. Kevin Anderson, I don't know that that's realistic. I mean, Maryland is one of the premier jobs in the country, and the flagship for Under Armour. To step away from that to come back to Corvallis, I'm not sure is a realistic thing. Scott Barnes has been floated around, and he's an old UW guy, so I know him from there. So it'll be interesting to see who they end up going with. But I'm with Gary that it's got to be somebody who's going to be there for the long haul.
Yeah, and Barnes, again, was at Utah State, I believe, with Anderson, too, so there's that tie there. Real quick, like you guys mentioned, an interim would be a third boss. Then if you have another AD that's a fourth boss.
Yeah, it's kind of five, actually.
Yeah, so I mean.
Yeah, and going back to your point about the women, we have one at Oregon State, Marianne Vidra. Hold on now.
I threw it out. That was my way of kind of throwing it out there without.
She's amazing, and being a former student athlete, Marianne, everyone knows Marianne, and she has a great personality. So yeah, she could be up for it too. Who knows?
I'm a feminist.
Hey!
I'm all about it.
Gotta find some good ladies to add to that list, right? All right, still ahead on #Beavers Football. Game planning for one of the country's best young quarterbacks. Why the Oregon State defense may have a leg up. Plus, we are talking to Alu Aiden, how he thinks this defense is getting better each week.
Off the deflected ball, the second takeaway for this Oregon State defense. Three-man rush, and it was read perfectly. Caleb Solo. Geller looking plenty of time, and he throws his third interception of the afternoon. Brandon Arnold. And that's intercepted. Dekuda's second of the game. The quarterback gets left in the dust. Guller's on the ground, and Dekuda is gone.
5 takeaways for the defense last weekend, and that is our flat tail damn good moment for this week. And here is a closer look at some of the defensive stats versus Idaho State, giving up 363 yards, but 4 interceptions, 5 total turnovers. I know that we've talked about, from Gary Anderson, obviously pressuring the quarterback, winning those one-on-one matchups are kind of what the D-line keeps saying. This is what we got to do better. Did you see any improvement, from week 1 to week 2 with the D-line?
Yeah, a little more comfortable. Getting more familiar with the defensive calls. With the new coach and new defensive coordinator, it takes a while to get used to that defense and get comfortable out there. And I think the guys are flying around a little more. So.
Yeah, pass rush-wise, we've talked about this already. When you're in a 3-4 and you're asked a 2 gap, it's just not the same as a 4-3 where you can pin your ears back and take a gap and run up the field and create dents. So you're not going to get the same production from the defensive line. You'll get sacks usually from the linebackers in a 3-4 system when you look at the Von Millers of the world in the NFL and things. That being said, the D-line, in my opinion, played okay. They played well, not great. And they're going to have to play a lot better against Boise. if you take away the 75-yard run, they still had, 22 carries for 61 yards. Mm-hmm. That's averaging almost 3 a pop to a team that really isn't known for running the ball even in the Big Sky. So I would have expected a little bit better in terms of that. But they did get 3 sacks and helped cause another turnover and an interception. So it was an okay day. They've got to step their game up this weekend.
All right, speaking of the D-line, one guy who has stood out early is Alu Aiden. Our Mike Parker catching up with him in our Toyota interview this week.
Elu, tell us about the dream and how it took shape. As you grew up, you moved around a little bit, but how did you end up at Oregon State?
I met Coach Chad, our current outside linebacker coach, the All-Poly camp in Utah. And he was the defensive line coach for Wisconsin at the time, and he made the offer at the end of that camp, and I believed in Coach A and Coach Chad's system and what they were looking to do with that program. And as I committed, a couple weeks later, I heard, I found out that they had left the program to come to Oregon State. So I got Coach Chad on the phone, and I was like, I want to fly out to Corvallis. So I called Coach Chad and asked him for a visit, and he flew me out here. And I just fell in love with the place. Corvallis is a great place. I love my coaches. I love this team. It's great to have found family so far away from home.
Alu Aiden in the backfield again, and he is every bit the force that we've expected him to be.
What are you working on, Elu, in perfecting the craft? How are you trying to get better day by day?
I feel like people look at me and think of me, oh, he's big. He's probably just a run-stop type of defensive lineman. And, I'm just working to break that stereotype. especially for me, you know, I feel like the weak part of my game is my pass rush, and I've been working on that since the day I've gotten here, and I think I've taken strides in a direction that I want to take my game and my craft.
You've said in another context that you're playing for everybody back in Samoa. And tell me a little bit about that who you're playing for, why that's so important to you.
I feel like my parents have sacrificed so much for me to be where I am today, and I feel like it's just right for me to, you know, give this dream that they've been pushing me since day one to get. I feel like it's just right for me to work my way and to pay them back, you know. Maybe if it's not in the NFL, maybe it's somewhere else in life, you know. And I've always been taught as a kid to make sure and work for what you want, make sure and work and push yourself to the best of your abilities, push yourself to the limits. And, you know, God has placed me here. You know, like I said, he's blessed me with this talent, and I'm going to use it to make sure that, you know, hopefully one day I can take care of my family and make sure I can look my mom and my dad in the eye and tell them they don't have to work a day in their life no more.
All right, Alu Aiden also listed as a backup tight end. We were discussing. That's a pretty scary thought when you think of that guy on offense.
I will slip Gary $20 to see that happen.
I want to know. I mean, like, do you think that we will see him on offense at some point? And how would you use them?
Maybe short yardage.
Hey,
short yardage
I don't think
for the goal
anybody's
line
stopping
or
him.
goal line.
Right.
But I think it's one of those things we're probably blowing the team out.
Right.
And we're gonna just throw it in there just to try it out.
Yeah, yeah.
But if the game is on the line, it's not gonna happen. No.
Wait.
Yeah, the refrigerator. He'd be the wine cooler.
Right? Exactly. Oh, I love it. Well, the defense certainly getting loose this week with this video here. Oh, somebody's having some fun in the background. Some good hops there. Now, still ahead, we are asking you which wide receiver will have a breakout game against the Broncos. Hop onto Twitter to vote. We'll bring you the results. But up next, we are breaking down the Broncos, taking a closer look at what makes their quarterback so tough. Welcome back to Blitz Lad in Southeast Portland. We are getting you ready for tomorrow's big game in Corvallis against Boise State. And remember to tweet us your questions using the hashtag BeaversFB. We'll be answering some of them throughout the show. Broncos coming off a bye. I know Gary Anderson, Brian Harsin, they say it doesn't matter. Do you guys think, does it matter in any form or fashion, aside from getting some of those healthy bodies back?
Sometimes it can hurt you. Sometimes guys will get a little comfortable. The sense of urgency is not there for that weekend because you have that week off, and so you kind of lose that momentum. But yeah, it can hurt you. So we'll see.
So you're saying it would hurt Boise?
Yes.
Oh.
Might come out flat, huh?
I'm curious what our record was coming out of buys when you played.
Not good.
Really?
Not good.
Really?
Not good.
I want to look it up.
Hey, look it up.
I love buys.
Look it up.
One, it was my one chance to sleep. Two, it gave you 2 weeks to prep. I mean, you look at last week when Deku had the 2 picks. He sat on those routes because he studied the Idaho State offense. He understood the split of the receiver to the wide side. He knew what was coming. He jumped around. He got the 2 picks. When you have 2 weeks to prepare, now you can study not only wide receiver splits, make that happen in practice, but you can study all the other things about that offense to almost know what's happening before it happens.
Coach,
and so
that was Idaho State, dude. He had 2. No. He didn't study film.
Did you watch the play?
They were probably looking at Boise State film during bye week. Like, you know we used to do that.
Hey, I don't know what you used to do.
Calling you out.
No, first of all, he played running back. So what film was he watching? He wasn't watching any film. He's like, look, when I get the ball, I'm not gonna hit the big dude in the middle. I'm gonna go out that way. He gonna tell me about stuff watching film. Anyway, yeah, they watch film. At least the guys in the secondary, and he sat on that route like nobody's business because he knew what was coming. So when you have 2 weeks to prep, those are the things, those are the advantages you have. I'm not gonna sit here and fake the funk. I mean, it's gonna be tougher. That I think those guys have the ability to have an extra week to prepare. That being said and done, hopefully they do like Evanson used to prepare when he was a player. Like, not. Hopefully they do that, but I wouldn't hold my breath on that one.
Well, and when you look at their schedule, I mean, the rest of the slate after Oregon State are very winnable games. I mean, there's a very good chance they could win out there, right?
I think we could get 11 people in the bar right now to suit up against a few of these teams, and we could win. I mean, I just watched Wyoming and Eastern Michigan, and that was hard to watch. But you know, I mean, that being said, that's why this game is really Boise State's Super Bowl. I mean, they want a chance and hope that some, talked to Bruce Feldman on our radio show this morning, and a lot of things have to happen for Boise State to get a national playoff picture. But they want to put themselves in the opportunity to have those things happen and be sitting there in the driver's seat and go undefeated. And if they beat Oregon State this weekend, there's not a whole lot of games short of BYU. They're even going to get challenged until you get to the Mountain West Championship game. So this is their Super Bowl, and Oregon State better be ready for it.
Let's talk a little bit more about Boise State's quarterback, Brett Rippon. Played as a true freshman last year, playing pretty well, ranked 10th nationally, putting up 323 yards a game. Of course, those 3 interceptions all coming a couple weeks ago against Washington State. But what does he do well?
Oh, you just took my thunder right there. So appreciate that.
All of those.
Apparently, you were paying attention and talking Beavs on Wednesday. He does a lot of things well. He was a big-time recruit coming out of high school. So that whole narrative of Boise State being a bunch of try-hard guys, this dude was a 4-star guy, had a lot of different offers, and he went to Boise State because he wanted to win and have a chance to play early, and both those things have happened for him. So, he's a nephew of Mark Rippon, who won a Super Bowl, all those different things. I mean, he has a strong arm. He can distribute. He's got a good crew of wide receivers. He has a grasp of the offense. So he's going to be a challenge, no question, for the Beaver secondary.
And Evanson, I mean, watching that Idaho State game last week against the Beavers, looking at the secondary and the matchup with this passing attack, I mean, how do you think the Beavers can slow them down?
He won't be sitting on any routes, the kid. But I think we're going to get challenged. I think this is probably the so far, even last year, I'm even thinking about last year, offenses that we faced that can throw the ball well. I think this is one of the best teams that we've faced in a while. So we got to be ready. And I think our coaches are getting those guys ready. Our secondary is getting ready, and they got confidence. They did 5 turnovers last week, so you got that thing going for them.
When you look at their offense, I mean, they'll show you a multitude of looks. They kind of always have, in the past 10 years under Peterson and Harsin. How challenging are they to prepare for a team like that?
It's a mess. I mean, there's going to be times there'll be 3 or 4 tight ends on the field, and you don't have any idea what kind of formation you're going to get. I mean, your defensive calls are going to be based on what you're anticipating. There are certain calls you'll make when you're anticipating empty that you would never make if you're anticipating, 2 backs and 2 tight ends. Well, because of how they're able to play with their personnel, there were times when you didn't know whether they were going to come out in 2 backs and 1 tight end, 2 tight ends and 1 back, empty, and they had the same personnel on the field, and so they could mess with you in so many different ways, and they still have that. They're a little bit more wide receiver heavy than they've been in the past because they like those guys, but it's a tough deal to prepare for. You've got to find a way to disrupt Rippon early and take away his run game to make them one-dimensional, which is really the mantra for every single team that you play. But it's really critical in this game.
All right, so while we're on the topic of what the defense needs to do, we're going to take a look at some of the good and bad of what they did versus Idaho State in our standard TV and appliance play breakdown. Nigel, looking good as always in that picture.
Yeah.
Your favorite picture.
Yeah, well, so obviously in this play against Idaho State, they came out, and this is called 10 personnel. There's 1 running back and there's no tight ends. You got 4 wide receivers. Kevin Clune calls all man-to-man. Now at the bottom you got Deku, who's going to actually jump the route because he knows what's happening. You've got the defensive end coming off the bottom. Now, because they were getting the ball out fast, he does a great job of recognizing, I'm not going to get a sack here. He gets his hands up, gets the tip, which causes the ability for Deku to get the interception. Later on in the game, one of the other things we talked about was the defensive line getting pressure. This is a 4-man rush. You have a simple A-game stunt with the 2 defensive tackles, and they do a great job of collapsing the pocket. But this is a coverage sack, and this is how secondary and defensive linemen work together. The middle linebacker takes away that quick read that the quarterback wants to get rid of that football. Everybody's covered, sack for the Beavers. Now, here's the thing that concerns me. You've got Caleb Salo right here. All he has to do is run downhill in the B-gap. It's a tackle for a loss. Instead, delays, doesn't read his keys, and the multitude of missed tackles. And I don't know what the heck happens here, because this is the worst tackle I've ever seen. I mean, it's ridiculous, borderline scary, and these are the things that cannot happen. And if you are one of those teams, if you're one of those defenses that takes a lot of pride in how you play, day in and day out, and play in and play out, that play doesn't happen because there were some guys who took that play off, other guys who didn't execute their responsibilities because they figured out we're up 23-0, the game is over. And that just shows, once again, I go back to the lack of maturity of our team right now. They don't understand that teams are going to fight back, and they're not scared to be down 23. Now, you learn those lessons in a win. Those are great things. Because if they happen to jump on Boise State, I hope they realize that there were some times we jumped on Boise State early 14-0. A few times ended up on the back ends of some face slaps. So you got to continue to play for 60 minutes.
All right, we're going to take a look at one of your Twitter questions talking about the defense. This one from the Orange one. I am Orange. What do you see differently in the play calling, the defensive play calling in 2016 and 2015? Obviously, Kevin Clune, the new defensive play caller. What things are you noticing?
With Sataki, I think we were, I think the guys were still trying to catch up to the defense, the play calling, the style. And I think with Clune, it's a little more basic. And it's giving the guys more of a, green light to just go and play. And I think a lot of guys are buying into what Clune is talking about. And so, we're playing ball, and it's good to see. And I know against, Idaho State, I think we kept our defense pretty vanilla. I hate to say it. We didn't want to show a lot of stuff because we knew we could beat them with our basic defense. And so, yeah.
I think Kalani made the mistake that I kind of did when I became coordinator for the first time. It was the first time him leaving Utah and not just inheriting something that had been there for a while. I tried to install Oregon State year 5 into Nevada year 1, and it blew up in my face because there were a lot of intricacies and things we had kind of grown to that I liked. And so I think what Clune's really done is, just like Evans said, he's dialed it back, said, hey, this is still relatively new to these guys. Let's just keep it simple, and it's really paid off.
All right, a little bit more on Kevin Clune later in the show, but for now, we're going to check in with James Dockery to see what new stuff is at the OSU Beaver store.
No orange pants.
Hey Beaver Nation, I'm here at the OSU Beaver store, campus location. And as you can tell, I love me some Benny. If you love Benny like I do, come on down and check out the wide selection of Benny merchandise. Here we have a gray and white OSU Beaver classic Benny tee, followed up by a black Benny sweatshirt, not to be outdone by the gray Benny hoodie. One of my personal favorites here, the sparkly Benny hat that I'm not gonna put on, but ladies, come on down and check that out. For you more traditional Oregon State lovers, we have the classic orange tee. You can't go wrong with that. Very popular among alumni. For you fellas out there, we didn't forget about you. As I said, I know you love Benny. Here we have it. A dark gray Benny, a light gray Benny, a black and gray Benny, a traditional black and white Benny. We have everything here and more at the OSU Beaver store. Fans start here.
And we are now checking out our Twitter poll, and we have been asking about wide receivers. We asked which wide receiver will have a breakout game against Boise State, and you weighed in and said Seth Collins with 44%. Remember to tweet us your questions at #BeaversFB. We'll be answering them throughout the show. Guys, do you think that Seth Collins' role will grow this week?
He's the JYD. I'm telling you, he's the one guy who's got that James Newsom, Mike Hass. Don't believe the hype. Mike Hass would talk trash. He just did it in his own way. He was not this quiet, good Oregon boy. He let you know that he was going to let you have it daily. And so, that's what I see out of Seth. Seth doesn't care who we're playing against. He doesn't care if it's practice or a game. He's a junkyard dog, man. He wants to get after it. And unfortunately, the guy on the right, if he had that much JYD in him at 6'5", he would be a beast, but he doesn't. Right now, he's like, I don't know, alley puppy right now. He's gotta learn how to get that in him. And Victor Bolden really showed up big on Saturday.
Yeah. Going back to the two guys that we saw, the left and the right, Villeman and Seth Collins. I think Villeman is, there might be something going on that we don't know.
Okay.
I just think Coach will play him when he thinks he needs to go in. I don't think he's ready right now. Seth Collins, on the other hand, I think he's still young, still learning the position. He's been a quarterback his whole life. So for him, he's still in that learning phase. And so I can see why people are excited about, that poll being, 44%.
Right.
Because they
want to see what he can do.
Yeah, they want to see what he can do. So
when you look at Villeman in particular, is it time to give it up and go down the depth chart, or do you think that we'll see him maybe as the season progresses?
I think there's something going on.
Yeah.
I think there's something going on.
I'm probably sitting here because I stuck with a guy a little longer than I should have.
Okay.
And sometimes as a coach, You know, and sometimes making that move, you might be able to bring out the JYD in the guy because he might say, like, you know what, forget this. I'm a guy, and if you want to take this away from me, I'm going to fight for it. And if he doesn't, then it just proved you right. And I just think of how many times we've talked about Timmy Hernandez and Paul Lucas and Trayvon Bradford and all these guys, Hunter Jarman, and all these guys who we talked about in the spring and early in the fall camp being guys, then it's kind of time for, hey, listen, you got to make the plays or we're going to give these guys a chance to make the play. And hopefully he fights back because in terms of his physical ability and the things, he brings a different element that those guys can't bring because of his size. And so I would hope that he would respond.
Yeah. Well, also, you know, let's not forget, there's one ball, right? And we can't get, I mean, it's going to be tough to get all three. And I think that's what you're seeing, a battle between who's going to get the ball. And so I think that's a challenging part, too. And also, the quarterback doesn't have a lot of time to get rid of the ball, which is another problem.
But that goes back to when you're 6'5", you don't mind the fact that the O-line can't block. Because then you look at Darryl and you say, listen, bro, you get the snap,
Yep.
take 2 quick back pedals and throw that sucker high for me, and I got it. And that's not happening right now.
All right, much more to come here on #Beavers Football. A little later in the show, our guys are giving us the keys to the game. But up next, Mike Parker giving his take on the Boise State-Oregon State series throughout the years, plus a tidbit on why the Beavers defense might have a leg up. And remember to play our CSN Trivia Challenge for your chance to win cash and prizes. Here's a look at some of the local upcoming games that you can be a part of. And welcome back to #Beavers Football. And we are sticking with the offense. Gary Anderson, these guys, you were proving him wrong, right?
What?
On the buys?
Proving him wrong.
On back to,
Proving him wrong.
well, I mean, maybe.
He got crushed. This might be the last time. Take a picture. This might be the last time you see Evanson Bernard on this show. Talking about the Beavers don't play well out of buys. How many games did you lose coming out of a bye, Ev?
0.
You never lost coming out of a bye.
I can't remember.
Not once.
I can't remember.
Not one time. 38.
It wasn't buys. It was
Ranked
something else.
teams.
It was
Yeah.
something else. It was a long
Yeah.
week.
So
You had
anyway,
some good points in there, nevertheless.
there you go.
All right, Gary Anderson emphasizing the need to keep drives going on offense. They really struggled on 3rd down, 4 of 16 against Idaho State. So how do they do things differently going forward?
You're talking about the Beaver offense.
Beaver offense.
Oh, okay.
4
Well,
of
one,
16.
you see that right there? You see how a guy ran through untouched? That's a bad look. No quarterback wants that. You see, I can't tell you. I think I broke down the first 7 3rd downs. Darryl Garrison was under some form of pressure in 5 of them. And that can't happen. I mean, if the guy can't sit in the pocket and deliver the football, it's not really on him. And so if you're 4-7-5 against an FCS program, he's running for his life and scrambling, that can't. It's just a bad look. So they've got to protect him to give him the ability to even distribute the football. And then you got to make him manageable. There were way too many 3rd and 7s, 3rd and 10s, 3rd and 11s, 3rd and 12s. So that goes back to running the ball early, getting a few yards, just making 3rd down a much more manageable down. So now you keep the defense on his heels because they were able to tee off. They knew that it was going to be a pass versus, hey, it could be a run, could be a boot, could be this, could be that. We just have to kind of play our keys.
And something we talked about on Talking Beavers earlier this week is that the offense still doesn't seem to have an identity. I know that's something that the team talked about this week. Evanson, from your perspective, I mean, what is their identity? Do they have one? How important is it to have a singular identity?
I don't know I really don't know. I think we got to run the ball better. That opens up the pass game. I think we also got to mix in, a little bit of Pierce, a little bit more, not just Nall. You got to play those 2 guys. They're different style backs. Nall's, a north-south kind of guy. Pierce has a little more wiggle. So I think we got to try to complement Nall, help him out. I think he's a little dinged up still from Minnesota. And then the offensive line have to play better. They have to play better. Give Garrison a little more time to throw the ball downfield. Spread that ball around. So.
All right, our Mike Parker talking a little bit about the Oregon State-Boise State series as a whole. He's going to take a closer look at these games for us.
Well, thank you, Amanda. These games between the Beavers and Boise State have been compelling, to say the least, particularly the games in Corvallis. 3 straight seasons, 2 of those in Corvallis, the visiting team jumped out to a 14-0 lead and ended up losing. the Beavers twice in Boise, and then when Boise State came in here in 2005, the Broncos jumped out 14-0 and lost. So I'm saying that if Boise State jumps out 14-0 tomorrow at Reser, the Beavers have the Broncos right where they want them. Although they'd probably take their chances with that. In that 05 game, Mike Hass, who just went into the Hall of Fame this week for the state of Oregon, ended up having a huge game, and the Beavers rallied to win that 37-30. It was a memorable day, to be sure. Now, for this game, that's kind of ancient history. More recent history, Beavers defensive coordinator Kevin Clune, as you know, was the D coordinator at Utah State last year, and the worst game the Broncos had last season was against Clune's defense in Logan. 8 turnovers, 5 of them by Brett Rippon. 3 picks, 2 fumbles. They sacked him 4 times, and Utah State won big. So that 14-0 ancient history and more recent history, we'll see if it leads to a great day for the Beavers at Reser Stadium tomorrow.
And what Mike was talking about, I mean, the Broncos actually have said that they've spent a lot of time watching last year's Utah State-Boise State matchup. Again, Kevin Clune was the defensive coordinator there. 8 turnovers in that one when Rippon was a true freshman. 52-26 win for Utah State over Boise State. Is there something to be said and taken from a game like that when you're looking at going up against Boise State and knowing what you've done has been successful in the past?
Yeah, I mean, you know, there's just sometimes there's certain the part that blows my mind is you had 8 turnovers and still scored 26 points. So there's the first thing. One, there's certain defensive coordinators that have certain teams' numbers. You understand their system. When I was a coordinator, where I think a lot of coordinators were scared to death with the run and shoot, I was really comfortable with it because somebody taught it to me and I understood how to mess with it. So maybe that's why Kevin's a little more comfortable with this system. The problem is he was at Utah State last year, which is a totally different animal, and that was a different Boise State team. So as much as that is a great storyline, it may not be based on reality this particular year because you just have different personnel. So we'll see if there's some little wrinkles that you see that are a bit different, but I'm not sure you can take that to the bank too much.
Yeah, and one of the things you saw in that game was, I mean, a tremendous amount of pressure from that Utah State front. Again, 2 fumbles inside the red zone for Rippon last year. Do you have, Evanson, faith in this D-line to generate that kind of pressure and really force turnovers?
Yeah, I think we're healthy. Our D-line's healthy, which is amazing. And so, you know, with Clune, you know, being used to seeing that offense, I think we'll be all right. And I think the players as well, knowing that he faced them last year, they feel pretty good about his play calling.
Nigel, what do you think?
Yeah, I mean, he's right in the fact that, you know, 50% of the game is won before you ever step on the field. And if you go into this game thinking we can win this because not only do we have good personnel, we feel like we're a better team, but we got this dude over here who smashed on them last year, that can just help between the ears. And then it goes to then the execution of whatever the game plan is. But trying to convince them that, hey, here's the way to go about beating them, you might have that battle won before you ever met with them on Monday because they know the same thing we know, that he's been successful against them.
All right, still ahead. What needs to happen for Gary Anderson and crew to pull out a win? Tomorrow we get our ingredients to victory. You got to trust this guy. He's always right.
I was giggling, so I don't even know what y'all talking about. That looked good.
Of course, we will have a full wrap-up of the Boise State-Oregon State game on next week's Talkin' Beavers. Join us every week for your Oregon State news, Wednesdays at 7 p.m. And now we're going to take a look back to last week's ingredients to victory. So, Nigel, we'll start with you. What are your ingredients to victory?
I'm looking for 5 yards per carry. It can happen either which way. I don't care who's carrying the ball. It can be by committee, but carrying the ball, we want 5 yards to carry. Defensively, we've talked about it. We beat you over the head with it. Hopefully, Gary's done the same thing with this team. But defensively, got to create takeaways. Got to create short field opportunities for the offense to score easy points.
And both of those things happened, and the win. So we got to take his advice from now on.
That wasn't like a big roll of the
Right?
dice. Like, honestly, it could have not happened. I think the Beavs still would have won. But, so we're doing it now? You want to?
Yeah. Well, now we have to get to this week's Papa John's ingredients to victory. And a reminder, if the Beavers score a touchdown in the game, you win the following Tuesday with Touchdown Tuesday. Use the promo code Beavers7 for 50% off your online order at papajohns.com. So, Nigel.
Wait, somebody owes me half a pizza?
I was going to say, I mean, right, if you get a touchdown in the game, so, I mean, you should get, like, Do you get multiple pizzas?
I
Like, can
need
you
a
get
pizza.
multiple or just
All right, here.
You
I'll
need
get a
some
whole pizza
clarity
after
on
this.
that.
So here's how I'm getting a whole pizza. The Beavers have to have at least 4 takeaways in this game. I didn't say turnovers, takeaways. I need
Takeaways.
picks, strip sacks, strip fumbles, all those things. Got to find a way to get those 4 takeaways. I don't know about 8. They got 8, but whatever. The other thing is they've got to win the special teams battle. Boise State capitalizes on taking advantage of mistakes. We've obviously struggled in the punt return game, struggled in the kickoff game. Got to make sure that we win the special teams battle, and I think the Beavs have a great chance to win.
All right, Evanson, you're up.
O-line has to improve, and spreading the ball. The O-line has to give Garrettson enough time to throw the ball downfield, and O-line has to do a better job blocking for the run game. We got to be able to be balanced to beat these guys. And, get the ball in those, playmakers, Seth Collins, Victor Bolden, and Villeman. We got to get Villeman active.
All right, you were feeling very good on Wednesday about this game as far as Oregon State winning, right? Are you still feeling good?
Well, then I remembered that there's a bye and how teams usually do come out of byes. Like how we used to do coming out of a bye. Like, I don't know what Boca Raton memories he was having, but usually teams do well out of byes, including when we were coaching him.
Yes.
That's it.
I love you, Coach. I love how you bash me.
I'm happy to be here.
All right, remember, game day starts tomorrow at 9 a.m., and you can join us every week for #BeaversFB on Friday nights. We'll see you next week.